forgot about this. Oh my god, I think I just threw because I double you in the face.
Alright, you ready to do a show?
You do it.
Actually, I definitely did. I'm not
How is the testing? Testing.
Really gotta get up on it. Like,
I don't know how to.
You're not helping.
Good.
Are we doing audio checks there? There's nobody touching.
Yes, very briefly. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
We are going to be recording our podcast, so for a moment,
Testing?
we're
1, 2.
testing.
Woohoo.
Hello. Thanks everyone for coming and sitting in the bleachers here with us for podcast hour.
Did everyone dance like a peacock spider already?
If at any point you feel the need to be a peacock spider, here's it.
Perfect.
A wonderful display. You can go dance with the spiders. Are we good?
We're recording, so on you.
Okay, fantastic. Are you ready?
Always.
Are we ready? Always. Is everyone here ready? All right, let's have a show. Woohoo! Starting in, see if I can make this phone work. It's not my phone. I'm gonna have music. Okay, starting in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 754, recorded on Thursday, January 16th, 2020, live at Sketchfest 2020. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight we will fill your heads with a hot tardigrade, G-spots, and sugar pigs. But first,
Disclaimer. Despite all the rescue animals you have posted on social media, regardless of how much time you have spent separating your recycling, just respectful of your attempts to buy locally sourced organics, in full middle finger to every hybrid vehicle on the road, the world is coming to a hot end, and it's all your fault. The Energy Star compliant appliances were insufficiently influential. Your silent opposition to fossil fuel industry lobbyists went unheard. You did nothing radical, and nothing radical happened, and so nothing stopped the climate from radically changing. It's all your fault. But you aren't alone. There are billions of others just like you. There is anonymity in such big numbers, and with the whole human species implicated in the crime, there is no shortage of witnesses and accomplices to point at. It's all your fault.
okay, you're making us feel great.
We feel safe thinking things will get better, that somewhere somebody else is adulting. But positive thinking without action is just mental masturbation. And while masturbation does have its perks, it probably won't save the world. And it's all your fault. What happens next is this. All of humanity gets science educated in a hurry, supporting emergency federal funding for science at military spending levels. Scientists do their magic, planet save, and it will be all your fault because you tuned into This Week in Science. Coming up next.
Yeah, baby. Start over. There we go.
Ready?
I got me kind of mind, I can't get enough. I wanna.
Everybody can dance if you want.
It's mandatory.
Mandatory dancing.
Mandatory dancing. It's everybody's doing it. You're not going to be the weird looking one.
Place we go to find knowledge.
Unless you dance
I
on my
wanna know
What's happening?
this week in science.
What's happening?
This week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone here at Cal Academy for the Sketchfest night tonight. Amazing! Thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. We are so excited to be here. and I am absolutely thrilled that, weather be darned,
Yeah, San Franciscans
we're
don't
able to
like
get
rain.
here.
It's hard. It shuts down whole freeways when it rains here, but we're here. We did it.
We are here. Yes, the freeways might be flooded, but we have made it, and we're so happy. We have a great show. Hopefully, you'll enjoy it. We have a good show ahead tonight. I have stories about life, the universe, and everything. You know, the small stuff. Yeah, all of it. And those sugar pigs I mentioned just a minute ago. Sugar pigs. They're so sweet. What do you have,
I'm
Justin?
imagining a gummy bear, but like bacon flavored.
No.
No? Okay, we'll find out.
I've got robot embryos, G-spots around your massive black hole, and why humans suck at being Earthlings.
Oh boy.
Okay, we're getting into some real deep talks there. Okay, Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have hot tardigrades. I have toxoplasmosis, and I
hope
have
not.
So sorry.
bad taste.
So sorry.
And bad taste.
Yeah.
No, you're admitting it finally.
How dare you?
It didn't come from me. That's what's amazing.
All right, let's jump into the show. But before we do, I want to raise your hand. Are you subscribed to This Week in Science? Oh, all of these people without any hands raised, I implore you, find This Week in Science. We are on all podcast directories where you like to get your podcasts. Look for This Week in Science. We're also on YouTube and Facebook. Just look for This Week in Science. Or you can go to our website, TWIS.org. You can find us. We're there. We have like 20 years worth of shows. So there's a lot of material there. If you want to go back into the deep history of science, well, 20 years old history of science. Let's get into it, talking about old things. Researchers published a paper in which they talked about a new method to look at meteorites and to determine the age of materials within the meteorites. They've reported finding little space granules that are 7 billion years old on our planet from a meteorite that struck our planet on the continent of Australia. They found this meteorite back in the 60s and really just were like, oh, look, it's a nice hunk of space metal. That's great. But they knew there were little interesting bits to it. And it was only now, decades later, that with technology, we were able to look at the way that cosmic rays have influenced material within this meteorite. A lot of these granules are made up of a compound called carborundum, silicon carbide, very hard stuff, very common in our universe, actually. This silicon carbide gets affected by cosmic rays, and the longer the cosmic rays are pew-pew-pewing into these little teeny tiny space dust bits, which hundreds of them could fit on like the dot at the end of a sentence, you know, the period at the end of a sentence. Hundreds of these little space granules, little dust particles, could fit in a period. And so cosmic rays have been pew-pew-pewing, hitting these little teeny tiny particles for billions of years. And over that time, it affected the makeup of that molecule and changed its isotopic characteristics. So it is a slightly heavier molecule than it was previously. And so they were able to use a new way of looking at these carborundum bits to determine the age of these little teeny tiny particles within this meteorite. They found a wide range of dates. The oldest, probably around 7 billion years old.
So our sun, though, 4.5 billion years old. So is this can we consider this an interstellar object? Because it's been floating around since before our sun was there?
The meteorite itself is not an interstellar object. These dust particles are. I mean, everything in the universe came from something once upon a time. We had this wonderful astronomy presentation prior to our podcast where we talked about how once upon a time it was all energy and then things coalesced and things smushed into other things and then they started turning into matter and things that we could see. And over time, stars started developing. We know that stars, when they reach a certain size, they reach a certain age, they're going to go supernova. And when they go supernova, they spew heavy elements everywhere. And so that starts the seeding of materials all over the universe. And then those little bits and pieces go into other stars, the later generations of stars. And what this research actually found, which is really interesting, is they found many different ages of dust particles from just about 4.6 billion years old, which is slightly older than our solar system, to 7 billion years. And they had some in there around 5 billion years old. And what is said to them is that there were periods of star formation. So kind of like a fireworks display where, pew, a little firework goes off. Pew, a firework goes off. And then you get to the finale and it's like, boom, 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 and there's all sorts of fireworks going at once. There were different periods of star formation in which they were way more active than other periods. And they discovered this because these granules travel through space together. Some of them are kind of sticky, they said. So there are these little tiny space particles that float around in groups based on where they came from and when they came to be. And this all came from a meteorite that landed out in the middle of nowhere in Australia. Yay! Go Australia! Oh, poor Australia. On fire. Yeah. But moving on, another story that I thought was really amazing this week, published about phosphorus. How many people think about phosphorus on a regular basis? Oh my goodness, there's a lot of hands coming up here. Okay, very surprising. But phosphorus is a very important molecule for what? Matches. You could say matches. How about agriculture? Yes, fertilizer. How about life? Life. Yeah, very important for life. And so researchers have been trying to figure out, right, those magic ingredients for life. Where did life come from? Well, you have to have the starting blocks somewhere. So where does phosphorus come into it? And they use the Atacama radio array in Atacama, Chile, to the Arecibo radio telescope in Chile, to look out into the universe, into areas of star formation and new galaxy formation. And looking out that way, they found radio signals that told them that in these massively dynamic areas where things are being created and big forces are happening on astronomical scales, that there are these pockets of gas, of empty space that open up within the smashing and the bashing and the crashing and the making. And the empty pockets along the walls of the pockets, phosphorus forms. That's where phosphorus shows up. And it's from those little pockets in the middle of these astronomical galactic birthplaces where phosphorus comes from. And then they went another step. They looked at a comet. We had a Rosetta mission that went and looked at the comet 67P Gerasimov-Cheremenko. And this comet, it's amazing. We sent a craft there. We have amazing high-resolution images of this comet. But also the image, not just the images, but we have information about the materials on this comet. And oh, lo and behold, phosphorus is on this comet. It's not just on our planet. And so they tracked from these pockets in space, in the middle of space, back to our solar system, phosphorus, this track of life, thinking that if there's phosphorus on comets, and once upon a time our planet was bombarded by comets, that perhaps this is how Earth got the building block, one of the very important building blocks for life, and that comets are how it traveled through space to make it possible.
And knowing how common this is as an effect throughout space,
life is everywhere. That's all. That's the only conclusion I can come to.
Well, I feel like it's hubris to assume that all of the building blocks for life started and ended on our planet. We are truly interstellar species, if you think about it, right? Like, all of this stuff had to come from somewhere. So it makes sense to me that you would need kind of all these different types of bombardments over the time from when Earth first happened to when life first happened. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense to me that it's all kind of interstellar garbage that made us.
But it's a matter.
Hubris is rarely right about anything.
That's true. Yeah.
Never gotten anything.
Yeah.
But it is a matter of, you know, how do these little bits of what make us up, of what makes life possible, how do they mix together in the universe to you know, become that beautiful souffle that rises versus the one that, like in my kitchen at home, falls completely flat. Yes, I've been watching too many baking and cooking shows lately. This is This Week in Science. Justin, what did you bring?
Okay, when somebody says robot, like I just did, robot, what do you think of? What comes to your mind? Is
Robots.
What kind
What
of
was
robot?
specific? Terminator. There's the good one. We got the ones that came to mind oddly might depend on age, but I thought of the old Lost in Space robot, not the new one that's kind of scary looking. But I remember the old one with the big bubble see-through head. Yeah, liquid handlers. If you work in a lab, you might see those a lot. Those might be your robots. Articulating arms that build cars, all kinds of robots. So what are robots made out of? Metal, maybe some plastic, a little bit of rubber here and there. That's rubber stuff. So if you were going to make a robot, you would start with that. And you probably wouldn't get around to using frog embryos.
Wait, what?
Frog embryos.
Frog.
But somebody thought, hey, that's actually the best place to start. I'm going to make a robot out of frog embryos.
Sure.
And they did. That could just be the whole story right there.
Yeah.
But this was published January 13th in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They repurposed living cells straight from frog embryos and assembled them into a living machine, a millimeter wide, what they're calling xenobot. 100% frog DNA, 100% not a frog. They created this thing actually kind of interestingly by using I think it's called the Deep Green supercomputer at the University of Vermont. And they went through thousands and thousands of potential design ideas and came up with one. The main thing it needed to do was move in one direction. And they scraped these cells, they stitched them together basically, and they created a thing that is running on the energy that existed in the embryo itself. It's not powered from the outside. They're looking at this as a prototype that might be able to deliver medications. They may be able to do exploration of areas that are very hard to get to in the world, or that might be contaminated, something like a nuclear facility or something like this.
That would be a very slow discovery process.
Oh, it depends on how big they make it. Right now, it's a blob of cells.
Right, I'm thinking frog embryo, it's pretty small.
That can move in one direction. Well, they can make it larger.
I mean, is it going to move at the scale of slime mold, slowly lurking over the surface?
Right now, it's moving slow. It could move faster. So one of the other interesting things too is it has a lifespan, shorter maybe than most robots. But that lifespan, when it decays, is just some dead life material. It's the kind of thing we're used to. So talk about biodegradability, it's 100% perfect, no toxic offshoot, anything like this. It also can self-repair. There is the regenerative properties, and part of the folks that worked on this studied regenerative properties in frogs. It can self-regenerate, so they can cut this thing almost entirely in half. It stitches itself back together and continues on its mission.
Because cells can divide, they can heal, they can regenerate, and especially if you're talking about an embryonic cell, then you're talking about extreme regenerative properties.
Yes.
Where we get into trouble is if it turned into two complete robots if you cut it in half. That would be trouble.
And
So,
then
yeah,
you
that was
get
not
into,
seen yet.
instead of the gray goo, it's just pond slime. I don't know. Taking over the earth.
It's an interesting thing to me too, because it's going beyond synthetic biology.
Yeah.
And sort of saying, okay, let's not reinvent biology. It's kind of worked really well for most of life on the planet. Let's just utilize it in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody who's freaked out by a living robot? There are a few. And that's natural.
It's a little concerning. I feel like it could get away from us real quick.
I mean,
it's
two words.
Too much madness.
2 words. Boston Dynamics.
Right. Oh my God. You're right.
Big dog.
Yeah.
Right. That was
big
the
dog
beginning. The robots.
Alive.
But also, but that's another one of those things. Like
They're still mad
the
they
first
keep
thing they did with Big Dog is kick the robot over a bunch of times. this is the infancy of the robot, and we're going to keep kicking it.
Yeah.
What's it going to learn from that? And then this one, let's cut it almost in half and see what it does. Yeah, they're having a rough childhood, so we better be careful no matter what happens going forward.
Let's just hope they don't figure out how to reproduce.
No reproduction.
Yeah, just cut them in half.
Well, instead of time to reproduce, you know what time it is right now?
What time is it?
I think it's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
And let's if I can get it to start. How do you make it go? Let's do it.
Loves our creatures, great and small. 5 pets, meal a pet, no pet at all. Want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
With Blair.
So I want to start the animal corner tonight to talk about toxoplasmosis. Who here's heard of toxoplasmosis before? Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So we talk about toxoplasmosis a lot on This Week in Science, mainly because I think it's Justin's main reasoning to dislike cats. But
It's the other way around.
but I have some really interesting breaking news about toxoplasmosis that will change the way we think about indoor and outdoor cats forever.
Dun, 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 dun.
So toxoplasmosis, one of the things that makes it so kind of infamous and scary is that it actually can affect the behavior of some of the animals that it infects. So toxoplasmosis in mice gives them this behavior where they actually go up to cats and get eaten. And why is that, Justin? Why do they do that?
Because, well, the reasoning was that they were attracted to the scent of cat urine, is what they suppose.
Right, and so the reason that the parasite, T. gondii, would want the mouse to get eaten by the cat is that it passes through the cat's digestive tract. That's where it...
Only place we know of that
yeah.
it reproduces.
Exactly. So it has this idea that everything we've known about it has this fatal feline attraction involved to it, that mice are going to go straight up to the cat and go, hello, and get eaten immediately.
I'm your favorite meal.
It's also been linked in humans to schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, and bipolar disorder, as well as traffic accidents and suicide attempts.
And it's estimated 25% of the population of the planet is currently infected.
Yeah,
by
actually,
Toxoplasma gondii.
And some countries are
Much higher.
significantly higher.
It was left out there listed as leading cause of child blindness in a couple of countries.
Yeah, it can actually be fatal if a pregnant woman gets it.
That's why, if everybody's noticed the warning label for pregnant women not to handle kitty litter, it's not because there's anything bad in the kitty litter. They're warning you to stay away from cat poop.
Yes, exactly. In fact, more than 40 million people in the United States currently carry toxoplasmosis. You could be a carrier right now and not even know it. It can lay just latent in your body and get passed to other people.
In your brain.
But this study from University of Geneva that I wanted to talk about kind of changes the narrative a little bit. So we've thought about this fatal feline attraction for about 20 years as a big part of what toxoplasmosis is and does. But this new study looks at actually the cause of that and what's actually happening in mouse brains. And it's not so simple. It's not just that they're getting pushed right into the mouth of the cat by the parasite. They actually infected mice with the parasite for 5 to 10 weeks. And then they put them through all these different kind of test conditions. So in one of them, they put them through an elevated maze versus a lower down maze. So the elevated maze kind of puts them more in danger because, mice are burrowing animals, so they like to be underground and kind of low to the ground. They also had them near different types of urine, bobcat urine, guinea pig urine. They had them around other animals that could be a threat, and they tried to play with them with the researchers' hands. It's more than just, I think, them playing with mice. Was about if they avoided a predator, which we definitely look like predators to most animals. And what they found is that they didn't show a preference for interacting with some things over other things. They just appeared overall more curious and less anxious. So there really was no link to cats in particular in any of these study conditions. So it really just seemed like they were less anxious in general. And then they looked at their brains, which is where this really gets interesting. They used light sheet microscopy to look at the brain distribution size and number of cysts. The cysts are the cause of this issue with toxoplasmosis. And they found that the outer layer, especially the brain regions involved in processing visual information, were covered in cysts when they were acting kind of different and had different avoidance behaviors. So the cyst number and distribution varied across mice, but so that showed it was kind of random, but the frequency of cysts and inflammation therein is what seemed to cause the change in behavior. So how many cysts you have in your brain from the toxoplasmosis, that's going to make you less anxious, which I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing.
So quick question.
Some people might think that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah,
It makes you more sociable.
I don't need to pop a Xanax. I'll just get some toxo.
Do we know, we probably don't, if these are male or female mice?
I do not know.
Because there are...
Usually studies use male ones.
Usually,
right, that makes
yeah.
sense. And in male humans, Toxoplasma gondii infection tends to be associated with novelty seeking, which is very interesting. In women, it has a very different behavioral manifestation.
Are you talking about the crazy cat lady?
Creates guilt issues.
Because this study claims to have debunked the crazy cat lady hypothesis
Oh, here we go.
of toxoplasmosis.
There it is.
But the
Bring it,
thing
Blair.
is, they didn't use female mice because in female humans, it tends to create guilt issues. And one of the things, if anybody's lived next to, or I'm sorry if you are, a cat lady, there is incredible. It is about taking care of all of and any.
Okay, well,
No pointing fingers here.
They're just building numbers so that they can take down the host. That's all that's taking place.
This
They're
study
just trying to gather
claims
enough cats to
that
get
the
down.
frequency of
They
cysts
will turn on you
in
if
mice
given the opportunity.
versus the frequency of cysts in a human brain with toxoplasmosis does not create the extreme behavior change that you see in mice. So that's their theory, is that it could kind of push you into the less anxious, more curious, more sociable realm, but it's not. You're not going to go crazy, cat lady, full tilt. That's
Great.
not going to happen from this. That's
This
what
is
the
good
study
news.
says, according to the study of the
Simply.
cysts
Still could be
on
a
the
cat.
brain. But in general, I think it's very interesting. It's just it makes you less anxious. So the mice were more likely to just like rub up against a researcher's hand or check out the guinea pig urine or the bobcat urine. There was no differentiation at all for cats specifically.
But see,
Right. They're not seeking out cats. They're just seeking out.
But the
They're
uptick,
just not.
Not afraid.
in car accidents, the uptick in
Less
car
cautious.
accidents associated with Toxoplasma gondii could be that less anxiousness.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like, I can make that.
I can break a little bit later.
I'll break a little.
Yeah, it's
This
fine.
speed is fine for this.
Or
road.
maybe you just have cysts all
Bring
over your
rain back
brain
on.
and you're in trouble.
Oh dear. Oh, speaking of cats consuming their owners, there was a study written about this in the Washington Post that they've reported on it this week, and apparently cats do and will eat humans, but as to whether or not they will eat you, their owner, that is still a question, and it wasn't really talked about too much in the report. Basically, it was
guests.
no.
Only?
So there. Have you heard about the body farms where
Yes.
forensic scientists
Oh,
study
no.
deterioration of
Tennessee.
bodies? Yeah. So there's a body farm, and they were watching some bodies and waiting to see what happened. And their video showed that some feral cats came in, and if you're
That's what it's for.
hungry and there's something to eat, you're going to eat it. And the cats came back. They picked a specific. Each cat kind of found their own body and stuck with it for several days, coming back to the same body to feed off of it over time. So yes, cats will eat people if they're really hungry, but maybe
But they
they'll
still have
love.
an affinity. for
But maybe
individuals.
they'll love you, their owner. We don't. That has not been tested. Just putting that out there. That is a question yet to be answered.
So many things.
I have cats.
But my number one thing is cats are supposed to be hunters. They're not supposed to be scavengers.
Right, they're supposed to be hunters, not scavengers. But when you're hungry,
Yeah.
you're going to be a scavenger.
That's like the meat-eating
Where's
deer
the
we
food?
talked about, right? I
Right.
mean, it's any food is food if you're hungry.
Vegetarian
Yeah.
sharks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have one more story for the Animal Corner today, and it's about tardigrades, which are amazing little creatures, little animals. They're known to be invincible to many things: the vacuum of space, radiation,
Death.
dehydration, death. They had one that was desiccated and dead for 100 years, and they reanimated it. So tardigrades are pretty amazing and invincible in general, except global warming may kill them.
Wait,
I
I don't
know. We ruin
understand.
everything.
This is something that flummoxes me.
Yeah, so they can handle everything except apparently it getting 2 degrees Celsius warmer.
Does not compute.
But if it were getting colder, they would be fine because they would probably just go into torpor or their little desiccated
They're
hibernation
ton states. Yeah,
They're
so
ton
they're
states.
these amazing little animals that have their 6 legs and they're also called water bears or moss piglets. But they have this kind of razor sharp little tube of a face. Anyway, when they get desiccated, when they dry out, they go into a ton state, which looks like a little barrel. And they can do that for, like I said, up to 100 years as far as we know. But new research found that their extreme temperature capabilities are not great. So they have this one species of tardigrades that they found in rain gutters in, I think, Norway. They have a medium lethal temperature.
Where do you go look for your science? Oh, Norwegian rain gutters.
Yeah, rain gutters, obviously.
Okay.
So tardigrades can live basically anywhere that it's wet. So if you even just grabbed a little piece of moss from a nearby pond, there's definitely tardigrades in there. So if you have any sort of microscope at home, you can look at water bears, which is really cool. You don't need a high intensity microscope. It's pretty easy. But their medium lethal temperature is about 37 degrees Celsius. They go up just 0.6 degrees Celsius. They pretty much all die. So they also found that if they had them in the ton state, they were dried out and they were kind of dormant. They could stand 151 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes.
Wow. So
And
even that desiccated state couldn't take it.
Yeah, they could stand 80 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. So they really don't know when they're in the ton state if they can withstand anything more than they're used to for more than an hour. But really, this is just a good example of how if the warming happens gradually, they might be able to adjust and adapt. But because it's happening so fast, these guys who are invisible to almost everything else we could possibly throw at them can't handle warming of just a couple degrees.
If anybody is interested in looking at tardigrades, a friend, Ariel Waldman, has made a website called Life Under the Ice. She spent a season in Antarctica digging in the ice, and she made a microscopy lab. She basically taught herself microscopy, petitioned to go to Antarctica and dig up tardigrades, and they let her, and she has created some great videos and this website, Life Under the Ice, or Life in the Ice, and you can see all of her tardigrades and lots of other little creatures, and some of them are unidentified still at this point, so there's some cool stuff to see on her website.
There's lots of kinds of tardigrades out there, so cool. And they can handle it when it's very, very cold. But they apparently just can't handle the heat.
I really like the idea of our hot tardigrades.
No.
Come on, hot tardigrades.
Tardigrades.
Oh my goodness. Okay, take a quick moment. I would love to tell everybody this is This Week in Science. If you are not subscribed, you can find us all places that podcasts are found, all over the internet. Look for This Week in Science. Our website is TWIS, TWIS.org, twis.org. And at that website, you can find our merchandise. We have a Zazzle store. Click on the Zazzle link and you'll be able to buy t-shirts and mugs and all sorts of cool TWIS gear. And Blair makes these wonderful calendars, and much of the art from previous year's calendars has been turned into items in our Zazzle store. So you can get, a phone cover or wallpaper. No, wallpaper, I don't know. There are things. Go search.
There's
It's
wrapping paper on there. There's a tie. That's what my favorite thing.
I like the mammoth lumbar pillow,
Yes,
personally.
It's a very nice pillow.
Yes. Additionally, we are listener supported by Patreon and PayPal, so you can click on the Patreon link at our website. It'll take you to our Patreon community, and if you're interested in helping us continue to do this show and into the future, then that would be much appreciated. Patreon is a wonderful crowdfunding community, and you get special things, little gifts from us for becoming a patron. All right, should we get into some more science news? Science! We are at the Cal Academy, and this is SF Sketchfest's nightlife event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this week's In Sciences presentation. Are we doing a presentation tonight? No.
It's a show.
It's a show. This is a show. We're sitting at a table.
We do a
Pretty
weekly
awesome.
show. This is just another show.
Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to see all your faces and your bodies taking time out of your nights to come talk about science with us. Justin,
All right, we're gonna go a little out of order here.
you're going out of, what else is new? You're always out of order.
Welcome to planet Earth, everybody. This is a fantastic planet if you haven't been here before. It's very rare in our solar system to be this wet and have this nice of a climate. You're lucky to be here. You're one of the few sentient species that has ever walked this planet. One thing, if you could please stop stepping on all of the rest of the life that is here, we would really appreciate it. This is a horrible. I shouldn't have brought this for tonight. I should have saved this for a different.
Full of bad news.
This one is. This is a new study that looked at the footprint of humanity on wildlife, and it's not good. It's really not good.
Like it's like size 12, 13.
So anybody who's living in San Francisco, I thank you for living in a high density metropolis like this. You're doing more benefit to nature by living in the city and not wanting to be that close to it. Because the rest of the world that keeps trying to get close to nature so they're away from the rest of us, they're the ones who are doing most of the footprint damage.
And so you living in Davis, that...
You know, that's a small town. I admit, there was wildlife there before we farmed it, but that's part of the footprint. So this is showing that 84% of vertebrates have their ranges that are exposed to intense human pressure at this moment. And about 16%, that's the rest of it, isn't off the hook. They actually have it worse. They're entirely exposed under the footprint of humanity. So especially, this story sounds really bad, but then you look at what has just taken place in Australia, where we may have just lost from the planet, from all of evolution to this point, life forms that we won't see again on this Earth because of fires that were largely brought about by both human manipulation of landscape and global warming. It's just something to think of. So this is. I shouldn't have brought it tonight. But part of the thing is, I do seriously want to thank everybody here for living in a high density environment. Next time you're complaining about the traffic on the freeway, next time you can't get a decent seat on the BART, you're doing a tremendous benefit to the planet by keeping all the humans in a very tight, confined space. The less spread out we are, the better for the environment we are.
You know the bad thing about this, though? A recent study determined that people love the environment, but they don't want to help the environment unless they experience it on a regular basis. So you have to go out into the world and into the environment to appreciate it and to want to save it.
Or
so everybody
where there are
maybe the museum itself,
exhibits,
yes, or
that
maybe
talk about the natural
the
environment.
parks in the middle of the cities. But yes, being close to nature helps people want to help nature.
But that's the park, the manicured version of nature. That's good enough.
It's good enough. Close enough. Hey, look, a bird.
Artificial nature. That's all people should be messing with.
Should we mess with sugar?
Yeah. Tell me about those bacon flavored sugar pigs, please. Sugar pigs.
So we've heard a lot over the last few years about how sugar is not good for us. But hey, it's great for us because our bodies love sugar. It helps to give us energy to do everything. I mean, we wouldn't have things like glycolysis and gluconeogenesis in our metabolic pathways if sugar were not so important. And so sugar is a very important part of our diets. However, the way that we respond to sugar, there's been a question as to whether or not it's addictive. How many people think sugar is addictive? We've got a few hands. A few not hands. Well, a researcher decided that he was going to test this question. He said, I really did not want to find out that sugar was addictive. I really wanted to find something else. But he took 12 pigs, 12 mini pigs. Why pigs, you may ask? Well, they're not little tiny rodents, and the foldings of their brain are much more similar to the human brain. A lot of their physiology is actually very similar to human physiology. And he gave half of the pigs 2 liters of sugar water a day.
That's a lot.
It's a 2-liter bottle of soda a day.
Yeah.
And so
That's a lot.
and he gave the other group just regular water. So we have the sugar pigs and the not sugar pigs, the water pigs. Yes, sugar pigs and water pigs. There we go. Then he looked at the brains of the pigs. They didn't kill the pigs. This is something they were able to do through mapping the brain using imaging technologies. And they looked
They probably
for,
killed the pigs after the research was done anyway.
They may have. I mean, sweet bacon. Oh, sorry, I don't even eat bacon. They looked at dopamine receptors in the brain and opioid receptors in the brain. Dopamine and opioid receptors are highly involved in the reward pathway. They found that in 5 of the pigs, so we're talking about a very small sample size
Yeah, that's
here.
a tiny N.
This is a tiny N, and so their significance was limited. But in 5 of the pigs, they looked at their brains on the first day. So after they were given 1 hour of 12 liters, 2 liters of sugar water, they looked at the brain, and there was no change in the dopamine receptors, but the opioid receptors had already started to change after 1 administration of sugar. Go forward a couple of weeks, they looked at the brains of all the pigs at the very end. The water pigs, no surprise, their brains didn't change, no change in the receptors in the brains. We do know that in people who are addicts, drug addicts, we find a downregulation. There are less dopamine receptors in the brains of people who are addicts. There are fewer opioid receptors in the brains of people who are addicts. They found this in the brains of the pigs after 2 weeks. Both opioid and dopamine receptors were changed. So this is a hint that, yeah, sugar, it can have addictive effects similar to addictive drugs, but this is modulating our behavior. It's modulating this reward pathway. There are still, this isn't like, yeah, sugar's addictive, boom. We're talking about a very small sample size of pigs.
And a lot of sugar.
And a lot of sugar. And the way that the study was done, there are other factors that could have affected it. In fact, they gave the pigs only 1 hour of sugar a day, and it was the same time every day. So maybe it's not necessarily the sugar. I mean, there's little things that could have affected it behaviorally that could have changed this. But more and more data is arising that sugar, it's potentially addictive, and is that a bad thing necessarily, since it's so important to our physiology and to our metabolism?
I feel like, in theory, no, because of what you said, it's important to our body, but now that sugar is in most food, and definitely all processed foods, that becomes a problem, because
Right.
you can't detox. It's always there.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Sugar.
And
all
by
around
addicted, though, it's probably wiring in our brains that had we found this several thousand years ago in earlier humanity, found a sugar source, that high energy
Absolutely.
source, our brain is telling us, go back, get more,
Yeah.
that worked, do it again, this will keep you alive longer. And so it's the addictive thing, it's not like a negative thing about sugar itself, it's just our brains are wired evolutionarily to want this cheap, easy energy source.
Old brains in modern times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me another story.
Astronomers from UCLA's Galactic Center Orbits Initiative have spotted a new class of bizarre objects, the center of our galaxy around the supermassive black hole Sagittarius A. So this is currently published in the journal Nature, and they're saying they have found these objects that appeared at first to behave like stars, and then as they got closer to the black hole, they looked a lot more like a gas, like they started to expand massively. And as they went by the black hole at the closest point, huge portions of that expansion got ripped off and started heading into the black hole, and then the thing headed on its way again. It's a really interesting object that they discovered. They named G1, and they were puzzled by it because it's the only one that they had seen like this. They just thought maybe this is some kind of crazy outlier. So they kept looking, and they've now come up with 5 more. So and they named them easily G1, G2, G6. Right? So this is very.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, it's a lot. So one of the interesting things here too is that this is when we're looking towards that inner core area around where our black hole that sort of anchors our entire galaxy, spinning around it. Things are a lot more populated there than they are here. So we actually are kind of lucky living very rurally as we are in our galaxy, because it's I hadn't known this until I was reading this particular study, but it's 1 million times more dense with stars in just that inner core. I might have been. I'm sorry. That's I misquoted the. It's 1 billion times more dense with stars. So it would be an amazing night sky if you were living on a planet in that inner core. But one of the things that they run into is they have gravity pollution. So we are not really horribly affected by the gravity of another star system. But if you're in that inner core with billions of stars zipping around, you might get grabbed by something else. This is actually what these objects are.
That would change everything.
And that's what these objects are, though. They discovered these G1 through 6 are binary stars that have merged, and they're gas on the. And this is a process that normally takes, from our observations, our estimates, 1 million years for 2 of these binary stars to sort of become one together without doing a supernova type of thing. Here they're thinking, actually, this might be very common. This might be happening all the time in this hot, dense inner core of our Milky Way.
All the time.
I'm glad we live what we do, though. It's a lot nicer.
It's amazing dance.
But according to your previous
I like our boring
study,
neighborhood.
we were supposed to live where it's more densely populated. So should we?
Okay, so we'd have gravitational pollution. There'd be extreme magnetic fields ripping other magnetic fields apart.
All the things on planet Earth that wouldn't have to worry about us.
And there's no parking.
That is, yeah.
Nowhere in the inner core of our
Sounds like
galaxy
San
is there
Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay, some good news about the ways that we can potentially impact this bad news, the human footprint.
Yeah.
What is one of the biggest carbon dioxide polluters that we know of?
Concrete.
Concrete.
Is that not correct?
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. It's concrete. Concrete and the methods that we use to make concrete emit carbon dioxide all over the place. Bad for the atmosphere, bad for everything we're trying to do right now. Researchers have just published about their new methods. Similar to your frog amoeba robots, they are using bacteria to make concrete. And instead of just spreading bacteria on the surface of blocks of concrete that have already been made, and just saying, hey, bacteria, be like glue and just hold the surface together nicely, they have discovered there's a particular group of bacteria that in part of their metabolism, they form calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is a very essential part of concrete, and so they mixed these bacteria with sand and a little bit of food and a bit of humidity. They grew a concrete block. And then they chopped that concrete block in half, and they grew 2 concrete blocks. And so they've discovered that they have a potentially exponential way of growing concrete in a way that actually will take carbon dioxide out of the air because of the metabolism of these bacteria, as opposed to being a net emitter. The problem is a lot of places that are making concrete and using the modern methods of creating it, they are also very dry places. And so far, these bacteria need humidity to be able to survive. They need water. And the idea is that they're going to try and genetically modify the bacteria to make them more resistant to dry conditions. This is potentially not just awesome for our own planet, but these scientists are also looking at Mars and thinking they could send some basic materials, a little bit of water, you mix it all up, and suddenly you're growing a habitat on another planet.
So, hold on. hold on.
No.
So,
It's sci-fi, it's the future.
it needs water.
It needs
But
water.
that
This
means,
is
wouldn't you want it to need water and be in a dry environment? Because if you made a building out of these bricks and put it in San Francisco, then every morning when the fog came in, it would grow. And before you know it, your footprint of your house is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. This would be a problem. How do you stop it from growing?
right. It's I think that would have
Frog
to do
robots.
with frog robots.
You have to counter with more frog robots.
This would have to be the life cycles of the bacteria. So you would create the concrete and then take them out of the conditions in which they would grow. So the concrete they create actually is as strong. The bricks they created were as strong as regular concrete. It's basically concrete just made by bacteria. So you have them in the nice wet condition, they're growing, making concrete, and then you take them away, and then they die. And then you're just left with calcium carbonate and sand and bricks. Bricks.
So the buildings would be made of dead bacteria.
Yes, they would, yes,
And
bacterial
usually
cemeteries.
bacteria poop also.
Bacterial poop,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, very hygienic.
Beautiful.
It's going to be wonderful. The world is going to be amazing in the future. Are we ready for some quick stories?
Quick
Ah.
stories.
Blair, tell me a quick one.
Oh my goodness. So lazy moths taste gross.
What?
Um,
When have you been eating moths?
I haven't, but bats have.
Okay.
So this was a study where they took moths and they put them, 5 different species of tiger moths, they put them in a fight arena at night, which is where they just attracts bats. So bats would just swoop in and feed on the moths. And they used infrared cameras to figure out who was getting eaten and who wasn't, and how the moths were reacting. They found that the moths that had yucky taste, that tasted really bad, didn't really dodge out of the way of bats at all. So they found that out by looking at which moths got spit out by the bats. They trapped them.
So the early bird catches the worm.
Yeah.
But the lazy moth gets spat out. I like that one. I'm gonna roll with that
Except
one.
they also have to taste terrible.
The lazy
So,
moth.
It's a
tastes
question of
bad.
which came first, right? Are they bad at agility and therefore developed distasteful chemicals in their body so that they wouldn't get eaten? Or did they get lazy because no one wanted to eat them?
Yeah, I think it would probably go that way. Because
We don't know. Yeah, but they do think that based on this, they've identified these specific compounds that make moths taste gross, and they think that they could extrapolate this to extinct insect species. So if they can find the same compounds in those animals, they hypothesize that that means that that animal was probably not very good at dodging predators, because they wouldn't waste that that energy, right? Like if you dodge out of the way of a bat, you might end up caught in a spider web, or you might use up a whole bunch of energy that you have to eat to replace later, right? So there's benefits to being slower or lazier, but yeah.
Neanderthal study. Really quick. This is. It turns out Neanderthals they went diving for shells. So we found this study a little while back ago. Just the morphology of the ear, the inner ear, has what looks like swimmer's ear in modern current humans. These Neanderthals, some of them had this as well, which made scientists think maybe they went diving. Maybe they spent some time going underwater for this to develop. Then they went and looked at, this is a cave that was discovered in 1949. They had 171 examples of tools made from shells by Neanderthals, and they went and they re-examined these. And what they found was, well, about 80% of them or so had that rough sort of texture to the outside, meaning they were probably just picked up off of the beach. A lot of them were shiny and would have been plucked from the seafloor in the Mediterranean when they were still alive. And so we have, it's also sort of interesting because we know that Neanderthals have a larger lung capacity than modern current humans.
So they can potentially hold their breath very
They
long.
might have really been able to like hang out down there and do the searching. But it's one of those things that just takes another one of the pins away that we assumed about Neanderthals as being, just the big game hunters and just the large predator chasers. But They live by the beach.
They like
picked
shells.
They picked up shells.
They went swimming.
They went swimming.
Maybe they went swimming 2 kilometers deep for alligator-corpses.
Sorry, what?
Huh?
Researchers wanted to find out about the ecosystem in the very deep sea, and we don't know a lot about this ecosystem other than it's very dark, and since it's so dark, there's not a lot of food available to the animals that do live down there. And the animals that do live down very deep sea, 2 kilometers or so, they survive off of what are called food falls, and that is when a whale dies, its corpse falls to the bottom of the ocean. It gets cannibalized, scavenged by the animals that are down there. The researchers wanted to know exactly who was doing what in the Gulf of Mexico at this great depth. So they threw 3 alligator corpses into the bottom of the ocean and tethered them to the sea floor. So they weren't just floating around. No, they were tethered to the floor of the ocean. One of the alligators was eaten up by
Cats.
giant...
Was it cats?
No, giant pill bugs. There are big pill bugs,
Like roly-polies?
like roly-polies.
At the
They're
bottom of the
isopods at the bottom of the ocean. Yes, Bazdarich giganteus. Big isopods. Look it up. Anyway, they ate one of the alligators. The other alligator, well, one of them, it looked as though its tether was ripped apart and shredded, and the alligator disappeared. We don't know what happened to that alligator. And then the third corpse, they determined that the bones became covered by a bone-eating worm.
Bone worms.
Yes. Bone worms, Osedax. These worms are little worms. They eat bones. It's great, but they, not just any old Osedax, a brand new species that had never been found before. Very exciting. Brown, fuzzy, bone-eating worms eating alligator corpses at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico.
But why alligators? I don't understand.
Because that's what they had lying around.
Because
Obviously.
There's literally no reason that I can see.
right, so
Buoyancy?
the question is, would they eat a food source that they had never come across before? How do the animals in the ecosystem interact with the food that comes to them? Is it they like certain things, or are they going to eat whatever? The other part of it is that alligators have a very tough outer covering that is going to make it difficult for certain types of animals to be able to eat them, and they wanted to see how the life forms dealt with that, and it appears that they all dealt with it very easily.
I don't want to throw a bunch of shade at this research, but
You're gonna.
whales not only have thick skin, they have inches of blubber.
Yeah.
Sometimes even more. These animals have to get through to get to the meat. I'm not surprised.
Not surprised.
It just, yeah, of course you're gonna eat anything that comes to you if you're waiting for things to fall to the bottom.
So
of
wait,
the ocean.
you would have done this study by killing whales?
No.
That's
Gator meat.
terrible.
You could, I mean, they're probably from Florida. Lots of gators in Florida. You know, just go to the Gulf of Mexico. Makes it easy. Oh, we have so much more science, but unfortunately we have come to the end of our hour. So we can't tell you about the sequencing of the genome of the giant squid, unfortunately. Huh?
Or
What?
South American coyotes. I had that too.
Or South America, or beauty sleep. There's so much more science out there.
You'll have to tune in next week, I guess.
You'll have to tune in next week. I would love to give a few shout outs right now, though. I'd love to thank everyone here. Thank you again for coming out and joining us. Thank you so much for being in our audience. Thank you to SF Sketchfest for bringing us here tonight. Thank you for Cal Academy for making this possible. Thank you to our volunteers who help out with the show every week, Identity 4 who records the show, Fada who helps in our social media chat rooms and also with our social media and the descriptions of stuff, and Gord McLeod who helps in another chat room. I'd also like to thank our Patreon sponsors. Are you ready for this list?
Very cool list.
Paul Disney, Ed Dyer, Andrew Swanson, Craig Landon, Ed Stu Pollock, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Brothers, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Richard Porter, Marcus Saros, Bob Calder, Jack Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill Cave, Eric Knapp, Richard Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Justin Taylor, P.S., Josiah Zahner, Howard Tan, Donald Fundus, Sarah Forfor, Dan Cave, Matt Bass, Darwin Handem, Patrick Ferraro, Ben Bignell, Jen Tellier, John Gridley, Corinne Benson, Adam LaJoy, Sherry Travis, Rodney Lewis, Tiffany Boyd, Mountain Slough, Seth McGrath, Stephen Alderon, John Ratnasamy, Dave Greidel, Daryl Myshak, Paul Ronovich, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Noodles, Kevin Meredon, Christoph Zucknarek, Ashley Pants, Ulysses Atkins, Artyom, Rick Ramus, Paul, John McKee, Jason Knowles, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dryers, Lisa Zalewski, Jim Gerfog, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Steve Eastman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie Gearing S., Robert Greg Briggs, Brendan Minister, Christopher Rabin, Flying Out, Aaron Luther, Matt Sutter, Mark Hesson, Flo, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and EO. Many thanks to our Patreon sponsors, and if anyone is interested in making that list longer, you can go to patreon.com/thisweekinscience or just twis.org and click on the Patreon link on our website. Next week, we are going to be back our usual time, broadcasting live at twis.org/live, also YouTube and Facebook at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday. Wednesdays are live broadcast night. We're going to be talking next week with Dr. Moriba Jah. He is an astrodynamicist who's interested in the growing problem of space debris. Oh, it's going to be a good conversation about space junk. So I hope that you will join us next week.
Thanks for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science anywhere you look for stuff, and it'll come up. And if you like the show, you're supposed to tell other people about the show.
Yeah, tell your friends.
Tell your friends, steal their phones, download the podcast, they'll find it later. For more information on anything you heard here today, if you want to look up some of the articles that we talked about, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. While you're there, you can also make comments. You can start conversations with us or other listeners.
Yeah, you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, what will happen?
Spam filtered into oblivion!
You can also hit us up on the Twitter where we are at TWIScience, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, not here, but on the internet. And we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science.
Thank you.
This Week in Science.
And we've
It's
got
the end
some
of the world.
buttons and
So I'm
stickers and
saying
patches up here for anyone who would like to grab something on your way by.
I have a couple of calendars, too.
Show them how we stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be new. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just get understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. This Week in Science is coming away. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a dice, we may rid the world of toxoplasma. Got the Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I don't want it. a longer list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness, I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. This week in science, this week in science, this week in science, 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 this week in science, this week in science, this week in science, 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 this week in 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 science.
Like I heard, like, oh, next week.
Okay.
I'll forget all about it.
All the music, all the time.
So preach that. No, I know, and I know that I've known this for years. I've known it for years. You're absolutely right.
This is folks from Slate.
Oh, you slated me? Amazing. And room noise.
Do you need 30 seconds of room noise?
Everyone quiet.
Room
Room
quiet
tone.
the entire
Quiet
place.
the house, room tone.
Such a prima donna.
Way to go, science. I've got an extra phone here.
Extra what?
Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being there. We'll have good audio out for this later. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching the show tonight. Good night.
What a day.